I'm ready, I've got my paper, let's do this. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I am bringing you a video that I've wanted to bring you for so long now. I've just been waiting for the right time to sit down, plan it, get my thoughts together and really think about the kind of things that I want to be imparting to you that I've done over the last few years that led to me getting a first at Oxford. In fact, I think that there has been no better time to get this video out there, as it's the start of a new year. I remember getting a first was definitely one of my goals for the year back when I was at university, and so I thought, why not put this together for you and give you some of the insight and tips that I can give after having done 4 years of a very long and hard degree at Oxford. So for those of you that are new here, my name is Manny and I am a recent graduate from the University of Oxford, having studied computer science and philosophy. So I did a 4-year degree that included an integrated master's, and over the year I had many exams and also had a variation, let's call it, of results. For those of you that have seen my results day video, I was lucky enough to end my degree with a first class honours, and I still can't believe it sometimes, although it's been over like 6 months that happened, but it happened, and I'm going to tell you how I did it. And just to give you some background information, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, this guy is probably had a really easy time at Oxford, and we're not the same in that I'm struggling right now, I'm finding it difficult. Believe it or not, at the end of my first year, I got a 2-2. So for me, getting a first at the end was a massive accomplishment. I definitely started university with a lot of confidence, but as the days sort of went on, that very quickly deteriorated. And I started to think that maybe I wasn't the kind of person that was going to get a first at university. I definitely think that if it was possible for me, it's definitely possible for you. Also, I'm going to make sure this video is timestamped so you can come back, watch this video again and again, go over the bits and difficulties or the tips that you think work for you at a different period in time. Because at the beginning of the year, you might be focusing on the content, but at the later half of the year, you might be focusing on exam technique and revision. So without wasting any more time, let's get into the tips that I have for you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps. Subscribe if you're new here. I make videos about productivity, lifestyle, fashion, technology, all sorts of aspects of my life. So please do click that subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell icon to get notifications every single time I upload. My number one tip is to introspect. First of all, you need to think about what's working for you and what isn't. I remember when I first got to university, the biggest thing was that I was so used to kind of finding work at school easy that the big jump up for me was something I wasn't able to cope well with. And it's very important to think about, where do you currently stand? What grade are you currently getting? Where are the current difficulties? And see what you need to actually work on. So for me, it was actually understanding the content. Doing computer science and philosophy. Computer science I'd done a very little bit of before coming to university, and philosophy I had never touched. And that's going to be the case for a lot of courses. You might be studying something completely new, like medicine or law, that you might not have done before. So coming to terms with what aspects of that subject are you finding difficult, or do you really want to make sure you can improve? Is there an upcoming milestone that is the point that you want to excel in? Is it an upcoming mock exam? Is it an upcoming module or piece of coursework? It's really important to kind of identify the goal in your head and break it up in smaller pieces so that you can actually lead to the bigger goal. So for example, if getting a first in the end for you is the big achievement, how does that work? What is your course structure like? Do you need to get a first in every assignment along the way? Do you need to get a first in one assignment this term? Do you need to, if your goal is to get a 2-1, it's really important to kind of backtrack that goal and break it down to see what other mini goals you need to achieve now. For example, when I was at university, I knew that for me to get a first overall, I needed to get a first in my final exams at the end. It didn't really matter if I got firsts in my individual essays during the course of the week. So for me, the important thing was I needed to make sure that over the course of my degree, I was understanding the material, I was mastering the material and getting better at the exam technique. So it's really important for you to understand exactly this, because every single degree is different and every single university is different. It's very important that you understand the intricacies of your course and your university to understand how you can break down that massive goal into smaller ones. And the second part of the introspection is to really think about the mindset that you're in. After my first year, I found being at university quite difficult in terms of the academic side of things. And so it's really important that you enable a mindset that will allow you to flourish. At the end of my first year, I worked to what I was thinking was really hard, maybe not working smart, but I worked really hard and ended up with a 2-2 and felt quite deflated. I'd kind of accepted that a first was never going to be a possibility for me, and that if I worked hard enough, I'd probably end up with a 2-1. And I think the biggest thing is just getting rid of that mindset. Don't limit yourself in any way. Just think about the effort that you're putting into things. If it happens, it happens. It's going to be a fantastic achievement. But focus yourself on the process and the outcomes will follow. So the remaining part of this video is going to be split into largely two main sections. One is content and the other one is exam technique. And these are the two things that I think really are the key parts of doing well at university. So in our first section, content. Now, content for me is the thing I was focusing on throughout the year, and it's probably one of the mistakes I made quite early on. It's preparing the actual material that you need to absorb later on when it comes to the exam and it comes to the final assessments. So for me, this manifested itself in ensuring that throughout the course of the term or year, I was putting together a very coherent set of notes, and the sources of this could have been lectures, tutorials, feedback from my assignments, extra reading that I had done, but ensuring that my goal, given that my exams were at the end of the year, my main focus for the term was just ensuring that I was getting the content that I needed to learn in one central source so that it was easy to come back to in a later time. So what I would do is I would create a single Word document for each of the topics that I needed to revise for the exam. So for example, if one week I was doing an ethics course and in ethics I was doing consequentialism, I would have one Word document open for consequentialism while I was doing all of my reading for the essay that week. Any reading that I would do on the reading list, I'd make sure that all my notes were bullet pointed there. So this would be like essentially my Bible for that topic. Then when it came to writing the essay, I put my essay plan in the same Word document. Depending on which order, whether you do the lectures before you've done the course or the course before you've done the lectures, sometimes I would go to the lectures, type out the lecture notes while I'm in the lecture, and then use that as the skeleton for further reading. So if the lecturer mentions a specific part of a topic, and then later when I'm actually writing an essay for that topic, I'll go back and do the reading, I'll then fill in the gaps in the sort of skeleton of the lecture notes so that I have a sort of comprehensive set of information about that specific course. For me, the real game changer here was just making sure everything was integrated in one specific place. The lecture notes combined with my extra reading to make sure that I essentially have one Bible that I can kind of refer to when I need to revise that topic or need to think about points to put into an essay. So the way that it worked is for every weekly essay on each of the different topics, I would give that essay to a tutor who would then mark it, and then in the tutorial it would come back to me with sort of red lines all over it with feedback, and I would make sure that was filed away with the lecture notes and the course notes that I had. But the most important thing is to consolidate that feedback ASAP, because you will forget the discussions that you've had, you will forget the context of those comments. So it's really important the moment you get feedback to see, okay, how could I improve this essay? How could I improve these points? Put those into paragraphs immediately and consolidate them into your notes. The other thing that I found extremely useful is while I'd be going through work that I'd already submitted or going through my notes, I would often have questions that I'd be like, oh, if they ask that part about it, I don't think I'd be able to answer it in the exam. Or if they ask that aspect, I don't think I know what I would say. This is the best, like, it's almost like, it's kind of sly to do, but I think it's just the best resource you have, is ask your tutors the questions you can't answer. Send them an email. Be like, what would you say about this question? Or what would you say in relation to this? Or go and email if you don't want to ask those questions in the lecture or after class, etc. Just email them if you don't have the confidence to go and do that, which is totally fine, because sometimes these people can be quite intimidating. But just ask questions, because it's literally your tutor, professor, lecturer's job description to answer your questions. So the difficult ones, throw it at them, see what they say, because the answers that they give you could be great stimulus for an answer that you can give in an exam or an essay question later on. The other great tip when it comes to consolidating information or just understanding the content that you're going through at lectures is not, if sometimes you've gone to the lecture, you don't understand it, you've asked a tutor, you still kind of don't understand it very well, ask your friends and course mates or go online and find resources there. I was very blessed to have some amazing friends on my course who were able to explain things to me in a much more understandable way than a tutor or professor might have been able to, because they kind of they're at the same sort of school level as you. They understand, they kind of know how to break it down, a similar concept in other courses that you both might be doing as well. So use your friends, ask them for help, because you're kind of all going through this together. Like, I'm pretty sure there's someone who had the same struggle as you who's now might have overcome understanding that concept. So it's very useful to talk to the people around you. So the whole point of all of these points is just to make sure that over the course of the term, you want to make sure that you're not worried about having the right content at hand, because learning it is a whole other issue. Preparing for the exam is a whole other issue. But the thing that you really need to get right, which I really didn't even get right till my third year, was making sure that I had the content in one place, that I knew the points that I needed to learn. And that you can only really do to the standard that you need to do it to get a very high grade if you're proactive about it. You're not just taking the lectures as they come, but you're going back and doing that extra reading, filling in the gaps. If there's secondary reading mentioned at the end of a lecture, going back and doing it, following up with your tutors with questions. All of this might seem like a lot of extra work, but it's really not impossible at all. I was doing all of this alongside many other social activities, running societies, being part of committees, so it really doesn't require that much extra work, maybe an hour or two a day to consolidate the information that you're going through in the lectures and classes. So hopefully, if you followed your term the way I just set out, by the end of the term you will have a comprehensive set of notes, and the only worry that you really have to be thinking about now is, how do I understand everything that's here, and how do I learn it to a level that I'll be able to recall it in an exam? So now that we've got the content done, we need to focus on the exam technique. For me, I would split this process of tackling the exam into three main things. A, answering the question of what do I need to know for the exam. B, how will I learn this information for the exam? And C, let's practice the shit out of this. Pardon the language. So number one, each course I would list out all of the topics that I would like to cover for the exam, because often you may cover more topics in the module than you actually want to revise for the exam. So I would list out everything that I would like to revise for the exam. So if it's, again, if I take the example of ethics, I may want to do consequentialism, virtue ethics. I may be like, oh, don't worry, you want to do Kantianism, but I want to do this and I want to do this. So just listing out everything that you want to master by the end of your revision period. Then taking that one step further, and within each of those, talk about each of the areas within each topic that you want to master. The way that this would look for me was a list of questions I wanted to be able to answer. And they can be as generic as, what is this? What is this theory? What is the comparison of this theory and another pre-existing theory or another contrasting theory? What are the merits and demerits of each of them? So that way I would just have a massive comprehensive list of all the things I wanted to cover. And that became very easy. It became a very easy checklist exercise in later stages of revision. So this was a really easy way for me to organize my revision and be able to see sort of everything that I wanted to cover. Moving on to how to learn, I use this interesting system that is actually a really common one that a lot of tutors at Oxford would recommend doing, and I'm going to call it the Tetris method. So when you're in an exam, you're going to have to put an essay together very quickly in a very short amount of time. Now, the biggest mistake that you might do is answer the question you want to answer and not the question that's actually on the piece of paper. So the ideal way that I would revise is take the questions that I had just spoke about earlier, so all the questions that I'd listed out, and have little paragraphs, like tiny paragraphs that would answer each of those questions. So when I'd get a new question in the exam, I'd be able to kind of take these building blocks of answers that I already have and plug them together to actually answer this new question that I might not have come across before. You do not want to memorize essays, because that's the mistake I made in my first year. I walked out of my philosophy exam thinking I'd absolutely smashed it, but the reality was I ended up with a very low 50s, a very low 2-2, because I had answered the question I wanted to answer, not the question that was actually on the piece of paper. Exam questions can be highly nuanced, and the important thing is to be able to recall specific ideas to answer this new and interesting question that the examiner has probably taken a lot of effort to put together. So once I would have answers to each of these individual questions, it can often be easy. I actually often found it easier to have short and sharp answers to lots of individual questions, as opposed to sort of writing out essay plans for hundreds and hundreds of specific questions. Then coming to memorize these points, what I would do is I would put them on flashcards, then turn those sub-paragraphs into little bullet points. And so what I would do is I'd keep a deck of the flashcards with me. On the one hand, have a question in my head, think of the answer, and then turn around and see if I said all of the points that were on the other side. I would also put the number of points that there are on the front side, so that I could also remember exactly how many points I was trying to remember. The other thing that I found extremely useful was just reading my notes out loud. I would take those flashcards and not just say them in my head, but vocalize them constantly, because I would find that really helpful in trying to memorize lots and lots of information, kind of having a conversation with myself. The key here is repetition. So if I was going to hall to breakfast, I would take a little set with me, and while I was at breakfast, just kind of flip through them and keep going through them until you've mastered that content, until it just comes naturally to you. For me, flashcards were quite a crucial concept, because in the exam, when I'd be thinking about planning that essay out, I would then immediately just be thinking of, oh, that flashcard had information about that topic, and I would kind of be able to visualize them. So you've organized your revision, you know what to learn, you've used the Tetris method, and you've broken things down to little building blocks to slot into essay questions later. Now the big thing is to practice those essay questions, because having these little blobs of subparagraphs aren't useful unless you really know how to put them together in a specific sort of timed period. This is where practicing past paper questions is so useful. In my first year, I did one past paper and that was it. And I did not do well because I just wasn't A, used to the timing in the exam, and B, used to the style of questions. So in my third year, what I would do is I would take a past paper, put the question in the center of a plain piece of paper, essentially like a mind map, and then give myself 10 minutes time to think about all the different things that I would talk about. This is when I would sort of recall those little Tetris blocks and try to fit them into this thing. Once I then had 10 minutes to see what I could come up with, because 10 minutes was realistically the amount of time that I would have in the exam to plan that essay, then I would spend another half an hour to add in extra points that I maybe didn't think of and didn't know then, and then I would highlight them. So the next time I looked at that mind map as like a question bank of different questions and the way I would plan the answers, those new points that I didn't think of the first time would kind of stand out to me, and hopefully I would remember them in the exam. I would do these mind maps for a couple of questions for almost all of the topics that I was studying, and then those are the things I kind of took into the exam when I walked in. Having these visual mind maps for me, and sort of not only was it very useful to kind of have those on paper and visualize where things were, but as you kind of go through the process of tackling lots of exam questions in a similar topic, I'd feel more and more confident that the little sub-blocks and the sub-paragraphs that I had memorized earlier were actually so useful in questions that at first glance I would be like, oh my god, how am I going to answer those? I'd be able to break them down into these little blocks that I already kind of knew about. So memorizing large essays or memorizing hundreds and thousands of essays just wasn't necessary. I just needed to know the few building blocks that would allow me to kind of answer essentially any questions in that topic. And building that confidence was actually very useful mentally and psychologically before walking into the exam as well. So once I'd done all that, if I had time, the last step I would say when it comes to exam preparation is timing yourself and putting yourself as close to that exam situation as you can. Because sometimes I found that I was being very over-ambitious about what I wanted to write in an essay in an exam, because that mind map filled so much. But the reality is, in that 1 hour that you'd have for an essay at Oxford, you really didn't have that much time to put that much information in. So you really had to be short, sharp, concise, to the point, get all the points in, not try to argue too much, but argue what you have on paper well. So it's very important that you give yourself sort of time conditions to really see what you would do in that situation. And if your tutors are happy to do that, maybe give some of your past paper mocks that you've done in your own free time, or some of the essay plans to them, and see how they might improve it. Because getting feedback is one of the best ways to improve over that period, especially last minute. You might come up with a new idea that you didn't even think of. At this point, when you're absolutely knees deep in looking at exam questions, in looking at past papers, in trying to recall your little Tetris blocks, fit them together to put an essay plan together, it's a really good time to also read examiner reports if your university has them available. Now, Oxford did, and I found them extremely useful to see the kind of mistakes that examiners were pointing out. Exam reports are something I've lived by since GCSE all the way now, and it's so amazing to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the examiner and see exactly what they're thinking. They're literally telling you exactly what they like to see and what they don't like to see, and it's always very useful to kind of hear that before you walk into the exam. So I would definitely recommend reading examiner reports and sort of looking out for the kind of things that they want, that they see people tripping up on a lot, and the kind of things that they see people doing well. Because the thing that they find people tripping up a lot on, or the kinds of things they point out, are the kinds of things that they will be sort of tuned to looking out for. So signposting them in your essay. If they say that candidates usually miss out points like this, or miss out this kind of analysis, be very smart about making sure they're in your answers and visible clearly. And there you go. That is tackling the exam side. So hopefully, if you have the right mindset, you've got the right content all in one place, ready, you've taken advantage of the contact hours that you've had at university, and then you have really thought about the exam technique and how you're going to be in that room, on that online exam for us Zoom university people. Hopefully those together will put you in a very good position to get the best mark that you possibly can. I think the last thing that I'm going to say is it's very important not to get caught up on getting the mark or getting a very specific grade. In my third year, I incorporated a lot of these and actually ended up with a sort of mid to high 2-1. Like, a lot of the examination process is on the day itself and how things transpire and how the examiner reads your essay, especially in subjective subjects like philosophy, English, history, etc. So it's really important not to get too caught up, but the big thing that I always had in mind was I want to put as much effort as I possibly can in. I don't want to look back and say, oh, I should have put a bit more effort in and maybe I could have got a higher grade. Whatever grade I ended up with then, I would have been happy with if I got a 2-2, a 2-1 at first. At the end of the day, I knew I'd put as much effort as I possibly could in, and I think that's what matters more than anything. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Do let me know in the comments down below if you have any other questions. If you enjoyed this, please don't forget to click that thumbs up button. It really, really does help out around here. And if you're new here, don't forget to click that subscribe button. This 2021 is my year for making more new and exciting videos about all new and exciting things. So let's see how this year goes, and I'm really looking forward to creating more content for you guys. But yeah, I hope you have a fantastic day wherever you are, and I will see you guys very soon with my next video. See you guys soon. Bye.